In business news today, 3 things to know. First, U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder steps down. What does the country's chief law enforcement officer's resignation mean for the banking industry? Then, airstrikes have now spread to ISIS's attempts to refine and sell oil. Can a campaign to undercut the terror group's funding succeed? And will Qatar's record $200 billion spending spree to host the World Cup be all for nothing? Lari's Exchange starts right now. Hello, I'm Julian Phillips, and for my buddy Andrew Schmertzy Smertz. Today, Attorney General Eric Holder announced his intent to resign on the confirmation of his successor. Holder has been one of President Obama's closest advisors and one of the most liberal members of his cabinet. He personally asked to travel to Ferguson, Missouri, site of last month's shooting of an unarmed black teenager by local police. He has led the administration on the push for same-sex marriage and for voting rights for all. In addition, his department has settled with the Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Citigroup for record sums for their flawed mortgage securities that led to the 2008 financial crisis. Well, Arise News Washington Bureau Chief James Blue has more on Holder and his legacy. James, of course, welcome as always. You know, many people say they knew this coming. Others say, well, maybe that's not so the case. But I guess the question is, why now?
Right. Attorney General Holder definitely planned to leave by the end of the year. And I think he has chosen this window for a couple of reasons. One, he wants to give the president a chance to have someone confirm prior to the election in November. There are about 6 weeks between now and that period, and by stepping out now, there's a real fear that the U.S. Senate is going to go Republican. It may go 50-50. And so the sense is with the Democrats in control and with a majority, they can get Holder out and get someone in, and that may just give a chance to get the first choice for his replacement seated and confirmed. Well,
James, of course, many people may know or may not know that Holder was one of the longest serving attorney generals almost in any administration. But the question is, what is the president losing at this time?
You know, what he's losing is a very good friend. And you can imagine in the helter-skelter world of Washington politics, it's hard to have someone at your side for the full 6 years. As you may recall, Attorney General Holder was an early Barack Obama supporter. They've known each other for years. So he's not just losing a attorney general, he's losing a friend who was a very integral part of the inner circle. Holder's wife and Obama and his wife, they're personal friends. And let's just be, honest. These are 2 black men who are at the top of the U.S. government. There's bound to be some affinity. And when one of those guys steps away, there's bound to be a feeling of loss. So that's what's happening.
Absolutely. And we talked about some of the settlements, the huge settlements he brokered as far as the banks are concerned. I guess some of these banks perhaps may be resting a little easier now.
Well, they may rest a little easier, but I got to say, Julian, one of the things that the liberal groups are particularly upset about is that there have been no criminal prosecutions for the financial collapse that caused the crisis in 2008. And there is some sense that in order to really possibly energize the base, that President Obama might actually try to get someone confirmed, someone who might say, I'm going to go after those bankers who caused such a crisis in our economy. That hasn't happened during Holder. He was very happy to just reach these large, unprecedented financial settlements. Mm-hmm. But the next person could say, let's go after the bad guys and let's try to put them in jail.
Yeah, there are a lot of people on that list right now. And of course, on the Republican side, a lot of critics, they're stonewalling investigations, allegedly stopping things in Congress, Benghazi, IRS, James Rosen, let's go on the list. But real quickly, James, what will his legacy be?
I think the legacy of Eric Holder will be the man who, number one, took the terror trials away from the military and tried to put them back into the civilian judicial system. He hasn't completely succeeded,
Right.
but Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the mastermind of 9/11, he's not being tried in a military tribunal.
Right.
He's actually being tried in a court. Yes, it is at Guantanamo, but it is a victory in that the court system has prevailed as a means for trying and prosecuting terrorists.
All right, our eyes are looking out for the next top lawmaker for the United States. James Lewis, as always, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Well, Holder's resignation is one more factor adding to the uncertainty amid a number of global concerns that have moved the markets down today. Here's a look at the final numbers. The Dow closed at 16,945.80. The S&P 500 also down more than 1.5% to 1,965.99. And the NASDAQ was the big loser, down almost 2% to 4466.75. Well, the top stocks we're watching today, Apple's seeing some major hiccups after the launch of the iPhone 6, folks. Apple has asked users to reinstall iOS 8 after users complained of call interruptions. Also, customers are also reporting the new model's aluminum casing bends in their pockets without heat. Apple closing down today almost 4% to $97.87. GoPro is making a serious dent on Wall Street, hitting record levels in recent trading. The stock value is up 159% in the 3 months since its IPO. GoPro up more than 3% just today, closing at $81.31. And Delta is offering a raise and a bonus for its employees. Delta will give all of its employees a 5% profit-sharing payout this year. And in 2015, nearly all of Delta's frontline employees will get a 3 to 4% raise. Delta closing down $1 to $36.66. Now for a look at commodities. Gold closing the day at $1,222.40 an ounce, and oil closing down at $92.50 per barrel. And in other economic news, applications for U.S. employment benefits rose by 12,000 last week to a seasonally adjusted 293,000. Despite the rise, the level remains near pre-recession levels. And business orders for durable goods fell by a record 18.2% in August, dragged down by a lower demand for commercial aircraft. Well, Jeff DeMaso, Director of Research at Advisor Investments, is back on Arise Exchange to talk about the latest economic news and the markets. Jeff, of course, always welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thanks for having me.
First off, the resignation of Eric Holder. What does this mean?
Yeah, for the markets, I don't think it actually necessarily means too much. It's definitely a big news item. It adds to uncertainty as we don't know who's going to replace him and what initiatives they'll want to follow in regards to, particularly when it comes to Wall Street. Eric Holder didn't really pursue in prosecuting some of the big banks. That was an issue some people thought could have been pursued a bit more. But in terms of, markets and the value of stocks and businesses prospects going forward, we don't necessarily think that's a really big sticking point for that.
Well, let's move on here. We're still not out of the woods yet. Jobless claims at this particular point in time. What does that signal for employment?
Yeah, jobless claims did come up a bit from the prior week, but we try and look at the average and the trend in jobless claims. And despite all the near-term, week-to-week noise, it's been a continued, slow, steady progression improvement in the jobs picture. Not as fast as we'd like to see. We might want to see some more high-paying jobs come back, but slowly, steadily mending in that direction.
And right, and what kind of jobs are we talking about, Jeff?
Yeah, so when we're coming back to that kind of high-level jobs, we want to see more engineering jobs, medical jobs. We've been seeing a lot more part-time jobs come back as companies are kind of playing a little bit with Obamacare and some of the regulations there having some adverse impacts, some unintended consequences in terms of more part-time jobs.
We've talked a lot on this show about the growth of manufacturing. A lot of people yelling and screaming for that, especially in this country. There's a resurgence of U.S. jobs. I'm sure this has got to be a good thing for us.
It definitely is a good thing for us. I mean, we talked about you mentioned the jobless claims number. That headline number was really ugly, down 18%. But again, that's kind of the month-to-month number. It really came off of a big surge that we saw in July in aircraft orders. But really that kind of core number, if you strip out that noisy part of aircrafts, we saw durable goods climb 0.7% in August, which is a nice, healthy number, seeing strong manufacturing numbers here.
So
in the
things
US.
don't look too bad, Jeff, but the thing that I'm always concerned about is housing. And we've got a surge in housing right now. What does that mean in terms for new housing starts? Are we seeing any kind of surge in that?
Yeah, so the new home sales numbers were good, and we would like to see, we haven't seen that kind of play through into new housing starts, but it's a sign that people are starting to demand some new homes, which has a great, as you said, big ripple effect in the economy. It's not just jobs for making those new homes, but when you buy a new home, you also have to go buy a refrigerator and couches and TVs and all that
microwaves.
stuff. It's got that big ripple effect.
And iPhones.
Well, you're probably going to get that either
Ones
way.
that don't bend. How about that?
Hopefully.
Jeff DeMaso, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
You got it. All right. Coming up on for the sources that fund ISIS, you're watching Arise Exchange.
I think that people in America do care about what happens throughout the world.
Global warming is probably something that has to be addressed sooner rather than later.
From Somalia and the genocide there, and that's something people don't know about. They have no idea the brevity of that situation.
The first thing I think about when I think of Africa is like war and famine and disease.
And right now with the tsunami that happened or the earthquakes in, Japan, we always look out for other people.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
One of the great things about Arise News, it is truly a multicultural global channel that is paying attention to communities of all different kinds, not just here in the United States, not just in Africa, but all around the world, as we're giving a voice to the people that don't traditionally have the kind of a voice that a mass media organization can have. You're getting here at Arise News that you're not going to find at the other networks is a unique perspective, and I think that's part of what Arise is here to do.
Time now for our business ticker. Stories making headlines across the nation and indeed around the world. A Russian oil giant is losing a deal over sanctions. Russia's largest oil producer, Rosneft, may be backing out of a deal to purchase Morgan Stanley's oil trading unit. Rosneft is struggling to meet the day-to-day operational expenses after international bodies sanctioned Russian corporations. And more evidence Russia's feeling the pressure. The country's central bank predicts inflation this year will exceed 7.5%. Now, the black market for your medical information is hot, too hot. Analysis from the Cybercrime Protection Agency, Fish Lab, says stolen health credentials can go for 10 to 20 times the amount of a person's credit cards. The firm says the data is particularly vulnerable since many medical labs use outdated technology lacking the security software. Hackers use birth dates, policy numbers, and other billing information to create fake IDs to buy medical equipment or drugs that are resold on the black market. Well, another big hack at a North American retailer, guys. Sandwich chain Jimmy John's says there was a potential security breach, affecting 260 stores and franchises. The company says a hacker accessed point-of-sale systems data from June 16th to September 5th. Jimmy John's says the breach has been contained and only affects cards used in stores. Well, it looks like it's cheaper to get to Mars and pretend you're there. India's Mangali spacecraft officially reached Mars orbit yesterday, making history for India's space exploration sector. The price tag has a lot of global space industry taking note, as the $74 million price tag, $74 million, is just a fraction of what other nations spend on similar missions. In fact, Mission Mangalyaan cost less than the budget for the Hollywood blockbuster Gravity, which took audiences to outer space for $100 million. Interesting. Well, the curtain is closing on legendary Yankee player, and it's going to cost you to watch. Tickets for Derek Jeter's last game for the New York Yankees are selling for an average of $642 online. Now, seats behind the dugout for the captain's last game are running into thousands of dollars. I'm told as much as $15,000. The kicker? Well, weather forecasts say the game will likely be rained out. I don't think that's necessarily true. We'll see. Anyway, welcome back to Arise Exchange. The international effort to combat ISIS is focusing in on the group's huge financial cash. The terrorist organization reportedly raking in more than $2 million a day on the black market. Not only are the airstrikes targeting oil refineries used by ISIS, but individuals known to fund the terror group will be hit with sanctions. Well, James Blue, Arise News Washington Bureau Chief, is back with us more on the strategy. James, welcome back.
Thank you.
Will this latest effort to attack ISIL finances wrap up kidnappings? Because we know this is another source of revenue for the terror network.
Well, you know, I think it's a good question. And the real problem is ISIL or ISIS or whatever you want to call them, they're making so much money on the black market from these oil sales that it is possible that they will potentially try to find additional Westerners to kidnap. I mean, here's the thing, and you know, kidnapping is so hard. Selling black market oil is so easy. I mean, just imagine, there aren't many Westerners around, and secondly, the negotiations that it takes to actually get money from a hostage exchange, if you can make, you know, multiple millions a day selling oil, and they're basically selling it dirt cheap, it's just a lot easier to do. Now, the reality is, will the coalition be able to bomb all of these oil sites? Probably not. And the real irony, and this is something that, you know, I don't understand, we've all sort of been knocking our heads around here. ISIL, ISIS, Islamic State, they're actually selling oil to the Assad regime. And so they are selling oil really cheaply, making money to finance their insurgency, and they're selling it to their sworn enemy. Go figure.
I know, this is crazy. We're talking about dirt cheap, about $100 a barrel. They're selling it anywhere from $25 to $60 a barrel. So you're saying they're selling it to the Assad regime. Who else do you know, perhaps, may be buying this oil?
Well, they are certainly trying to smuggle it out in as many ways as possible. They are certainly selling it to some folks over in Turkey. They're selling it to other people in Iraq. And, you know, they're also selling it to the Kurds. There is a big market for oil, and as you know, oil prices are falling. And even the fact that coalition is actually bombing in the region, that hasn't created a spike in oil prices. So everyone is trying to profit. Putting more oil on the market decreases the price, and so all those surrounding countries and all those middlemen are trying to grab as much as they can.
Okay, real quickly, we've got about 30 seconds left. James, I've got to ask you, if they are successful in bombing some of these oil refineries, can ISIS find its money from someplace else outside of beheadings, that is, and kidnappings?
Look, ISIS took over the central bank in Mosul a few months ago. That alone was about $100 million US. ISIL, ISIS, again, Islamic State, is the best funded terror group insurgency ever. They will never hurt for cash, and a lot of it comes from Qatar.
James Blue, you were so smart. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
Okay. Ahead, global leaders convene to fight the Ebola epidemic. Of course, you're watching Arise Exchange.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. President Barack Obama was back at the United Nations today, this time to address the Ebola crisis and its threat to the world. Arise News senior UN correspondent Frank Ucciardo is here with the latest. Frank.
Julian, yes, all eyes were focused on the UN today as President Obama told the world body that more people will die in the Ebola epidemic and that it is a growing threat to regional and global security. Mr. Obama said the world could count on America to lead the battle to combat the spread of Ebola, but more needs to be done.
There's still a significant gap between where we are and where we need to be. We know from experience that the response to an outbreak of this magnitude has to be fast and it has to be sustained. More businesses, especially those who already have a presence in the region, can quickly provide their own expertise and resources, from access to critical supply chains to telecommunications.
President Obama has already dispatched 3,000 U.S. troops to Liberia to set up facilities to help train civilians to treat Ebola victims. Julian?
And Frankie, I understand the president is actually putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of surprising cooperation he got from Congress. He asked to put aside some money that was left over from the Afghan war budget, and that's about $1 billion. And he got approval yesterday, so he's going to be shifting $1 billion over to Ebola aid.
And, you know, that's really critical right now because he was also surrounded by a bunch of key UN officials from the World Health Organization. And they're actually painting a pretty grim picture of what's going on over there.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, he was joined today by Dr. Margaret Chan. She's the director of the World Health Organization. And she basically was saying that, look, you know, it's really advancing faster than we could do anything about it. And she reminded people that almost more than actually 6,000 people have been affected by the virus, and nearly half of those have already died.
There's been so much criticism of the UN dealing with conflicts around the globe and, you know, their lack of being able to really do anything. But apparently they should be pretty effective in this if they get the money that they need and all the resources.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, about 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago, they set up a special UN crisis center strictly for Ebola at headquarters. It's like a war room for combating the disease. And they've also set up special airport sections in Ghana and in Spain that will facilitate the ferrying of supplies from different parts of the world into West Africa.
I've just got to ask you one more question in terms of the response that the world is giving to this outbreak. We hear so much about what the United States is doing, Barack Obama, in terms of money and troops. What about the rest of the world?
Well, over 40 countries have already signed up to help the U.S. out in this. Of course, President Obama, in his speech, said, look, more needs to be done, more people need to step up, but a lot of people have already signed on. And this is one thing that's not controversial when it comes to a lot of the diplomatic shenanigans that go on at the UN. Everybody really is on board to help out West Africa because they know this is something that can go transnational, it can go across borders, and it could eventually affect other countries way beyond the African continent.
Shenanigans at the UN, Frank? Are you serious?
Well, you know what? Sometimes that's standard operating procedure.
To say the least. And hopefully, as we close here, that some people have been resistant to help from medical workers over in countries as well as journalists. Let's hope that changes. Frank Ucciardo, thank you so much, sir. All right. Next, Qatar's $200 billion spending spree on hosting the World Cup. Yes, folks, and you're watching Arise Exchange.
The best part of the day for me is when Arise America goes on the air. It's the opportunity for me to tell the stories that I've learned about all day long and also to talk to some of the smartest, most experienced experts on any number of news topics and explain not just what's happening, but what it means to us. That's the one thing that's great about Arise America. We don't just tell the news, we also seek to understand why it matters.
Last week on Arise Exchange, will Janet Yellen spring any surprises on the markets when it comes to interest rates?
The market is worried that if they raise rates too soon, you might kill the recovery.
President Obama pledged to send 3,000 troops to West Africa to fight Ebola. Kanye West demanded all the fans attending a concert in Sydney stand.
I can't do the rest of the show until everybody stand up.
One was in a wheelchair. The other had a prosthetic leg. Watch this week for more. Arise Exchange.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. Qutar plans to spend up to $200 billion to host the 2022 World Cup, even though the tournament could be moved to yet another country amid a bribery scandal and concerns over the country's dangerous summer heat. Nonetheless, Qutar is moving forward with preparations many worry won't be sustainable after the games are gone. Well, Mike Bacco is senior editor at thedailynational.com, and he joins us with more. Well, $200 billion. What is that to Qutar? I mean, that's nothing.
That's a drop in the oil bucket, if you think about it. Brazil spent $65 billion to put on this last World Cup, and now Qatar will just almost triple that. So, here we are looking at them having to build basically the entire infrastructure of everything that they're going to need, from stadiums to rails to everything.
Well, let's take a look at some of the stuff here, Mike. Stadiums. That's the lowest on the list, like $4 billion.
Oh, yeah.
In stadiums. Hamad International Airport, $17.5 billion. Lusail City, $45 billion. You can put dollar signs in all the buildings around Qatar, and we're talking about bingo. A whole heck of a lot of moolah.
A lot of moolah, and who's really going to be going there? You look at the international audience, obviously, for this. This is the first time it's being held in a Saudi Arabian country. So you think about Brazil, you think about where it was held in previous years, and you had an international influx of people going there. The stadiums, 80,000, 100,000. They're building stadiums for 45, 50,000 people. So they're anticipating a much lower amount of tourism and travel, but they have to build all this infrastructure up even to hold up half of what a country like Brazil had for this last World Cup.
That's what I'm saying, Mr. Money Pants, Mike Bacco. The money that Brazil spent on this is nothing. And of course, they had all sorts of riots over there. People were complaining that, of course, they could spend it on infrastructure, dealing with the poor and the disenfranchised in their country. But you're not getting any of that kind of backlash in Qatar. Number one, it's a very rich country. And we're talking about, out of all the money they're spending, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, it's like only 10% of their outgoing income?
For a year. So this, you're looking at something, they're looking at this almost as if it's a marketing PR ploy. They thought about this when they put in their bid in 2010, and they're looking at this as a long-term strategy in terms of building up the name. But in a way, it's backfiring. You're looking at the amount of energy that FIFA officials are going to dispel bribery concerns. You're looking at us talking about how much they're putting into it. You're looking at an international audience that doesn't want their European game in Qatar.
But, Mike, I got to ask you a question. In all fairness to Qatar, you talk about a lot of countries that have huge games, the Olympics, the World Cup, all those kinds of things. After most countries build these infrastructures, do they really get any major use? I mean, you look at Beijing and that stadium that they have. What are they having over there? What are they running over there?
The bird's nest. It's now decaying. You look at the worst example out of this is you look at Athens in 2004 for the Olympics. Virtually all of their venues, rusted heaps of scrap metal.
A modern-day Acropolis.
Basically, yes. So you look at everything that is built. Very few cities have ever been able to turn that infrastructure into something usable. London was able to do it, so much so that they're thinking about Rio not being ready in 2016. They could still go back to London and get some use out of those stadiums. So they've been able to repurpose, but by and large, billions of dollars in, billions of dollars out to sponsors, to organizers like the Olympics and to FIFA. Not really much in terms of long-lasting value.
Mike, the bottom line is, I guess, in the long run, they lose money on this. They have the money, only 10% of outgoing income for a year. Who really cares? I mean, does anybody really care about this?
I think people care because it seems like the game is going in a direction that they don't want it to go. They want it to be in a European country or a North American country.
And that still may happen.
And that still may happen because if more of these allegations come out, if more FIFA officials get behind having the games taken away, I think they're still going to build. Again, even if they spend $50 billion and they get one or two stadiums and some infrastructure out of it, it'll be a win for them in their mind.
I'll tell you what, 10%, you just sell that blue suit you have on there, they'll get back their money.
All right, there you go.
You didn't get that from today's game. Mike Bacco, thank you so much for your insight as always. Well, tomorrow on Xchange, big payouts for Wall Street whistleblowers. Congress is considering a law to increase rewards paid to tipsters who provide evidence of financial fraud. Taking a look at the markets again, the Dow closed at 16,945.80. The S&P 500 also down more than 1.5% to 1965.99. And the Nasdaq was the big loser, down almost 2% to 4466.75. Well, thanks for watching Arise Exchange. I'm going to get Mike Baco's suit. I'm going to trade mine in. And Schmertzy will be back tomorrow with more good stuff, folks. And we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.